course. I will also mention that we will talk about it soon, but Team8 was founded by veterans, including Liran, of the top secret, Israel's most highly regarded top secret cyber AI unit, 8200. And Nadav Tzafrir was the commander of that unit, which I believe Liran was under his command. And Nadav Tzafrir is most definitely one of the hottest, most interesting names in the Israeli tech scene. And he will be speaking next month. We're doing a conference. Excuse me, I'm doing something else in the same time. He will be speaking at our event. We're doing basically the only event in the United States that I think is happening this year. Again, you know, who knows with COVID, but we're doing an event with our good friends, the Silverstein family at the World Trade Center at the rooftop, which is basically a space they don't rent out. It's theirs, and I'm very lucky to have that. So it's going to be a very safe event, and I have great keynotes. David Sable, the legend, the marketing legend, and I have Tremel Crow, one of the most well-known families in the United States, basically from Dallas. His father at some point was the largest landlord in the United States. We have Tal Carrot, who's the president of Silverstein, married to Lisa Silverstein, the daughter of Larry, and of course, Nadav Tzafrir. So that's going to be very interesting. And a couple of weeks ago, I spoke here with Sarit Firon, who's another legend, with $4 billion of exits that she was involved in. I don't know many that are in that even remote level. It was very, very interesting. We discussed several issues regarding Team8, and this is basically our second discussion. So good morning, everybody from Rye, New York. I officially now start our discussion, and good morning, Liran. And we met many times in Israel before. And Liran is sitting, as you can see, in his isolated office. He's the only one that's working this week, especially the last week of the summer. So we should thank him for that and make him not feel alone. So maybe Liran will start by talking about, again, one of the most interesting secret groups coming out of Israel. And I want to hear about your experience with Unit 8000 and what for you made it what I think Business Insider called the best tech school on earth. So tell us about it.
Sure. So first of all, again, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me, Danny. It's a very, challenging time for the world now with a pandemic, but for us, the ones in technology industry, it's also a very exciting time because we can bring a lot of value, and also we're very productive and very busy. To your question around 8200, so maybe before I give my personal experience, I'll say a few words about what 8200 is. So 8200 is a unit within the Israeli military, parts of the intelligence corps, actually alongside quite a few other units, but by itself, it's the largest unit in the military. It's bigger than the Israeli Navy, and it's responsible for a big portion of the country's intelligence. What 8200 was used to be doing is signal intelligence, which is tapping into phone calls and emails, what you see in the movies, but passively for the most of its history. But in the last quite a few years has transitioned to be focused very much on cyber, meaning the same thing, but in an active manner. So 8200 basically runs cyber warfare operations in order to gather intelligence to protect the state of Israel, very similar to what the NSA does in the US, right? And what GCHQ does in the UK. So that's what the unit is doing. The unique things about it, and my experience relate to it as well, is first the level of talent, and this is probably the best advantage that the unit has. Everybody here probably knows that in Israel there's a mandatory service where everybody goes to the military at the age of 18, but 8200 has a first pick on a national level every year to choose the top 1% to come serve at 8200 before the draft for all the other organizations, which really gave the unit a phenomenal opportunity to build something big. What 8200 does is screen the entire, not 18, but 16-year-old population about 2 years before through tests and simulations and interviews, through which they've perfected the ability to predict who of those people will be amazing talents in different skills that they need in cyber. So as example, you need amazing attackers, you need great engineers, you need great reverse engineers, you need great blind protocol analysts. The unit knows how to predict who of the talents will be amazing at each of these, even if they don't know what it is, right, at that young age. And basically, the unit gets all those amazing people. From a personal experience standpoint, a lot of the 8200 talent, and I served in the unit for 6 years and went through this recruiting process, is when you get into the unit, you used to, before that in high school, to feel like you're amongst the smartest in your class, but then all of a sudden when you get to 8200, you're not the smartest anymore because you're surrounded by really, really, really smart people and you actually feel stupid most of the time. So the level of talent is definitely one of the things that are unique. Training is the second part. So you've been predicted to be very well in these skills, but then you are thrown into the waters really quickly, only after just a couple of months of training. For me, three months, morning till night, and then again thrown into the waters to start doing very, very challenging tasks. For the ones that develop themselves not only to technology but also leadership. I, for example, went for officer school just 1 year after served as an engineer in the unit for 1 year, and then went to officer school, coming back to lead the team of 10 engineers that I was part of, and then a bigger team. That's something that is true for all the military, where you are practicing leadership at a very young age. But this is in the technology environment, which is a great experience to have. Lastly, I'll say then it's the culture. So 8200 is very different from other military units organizations. Typically, it's a very you have commanders leading by example, leading by experience. Those officers fought the battles. They know how to lead the people. In 8200, which does technology and cyber, you cannot lead by example because the pace of change is so fast that the commanders, the leaders, can only tell those youngsters, 18, 19-year-old youngsters, they can tell them what we want to achieve, where we want to go, but they have no way to tell them how to get there. And these are 18, 19-year-old folks that actually figure it out by themselves. And it's also not rare that you'll see in the unit taking a new group of people, small team, giving them really some impassable task and have them try to do it and eventually fail. Then a year after, trying to give a new group of people the same task, see them fail again. And then in the third year, you give the same task and all of a sudden magic happens and someone cracks it. So that's something that is really in the normal in 8200, which basically just goes to show how failure tolerant and entrepreneurial with bottom-up innovation from the junior people and not from top down is how the unit works. Which basically goes to show how the impact on Israel is very dominant, not by the fact that the flow of talents, the thousands of people that graduate from 8200 is kind of fuels the tech ecosystem and made Israel the tech nation it is. It's also very impactful on the fact that Israel has become the startup nation because of this entrepreneurial culture and failure tolerant culture that they're bringing in. And those people are really, starting startup companies thereafter, high risk, high reward. The Gil Schwades of the world, the Nir Tzuks of the world are a great example. So that's a little bit of flavor from my perspective on why 8200 is so unique.
Yeah, and by the way, you mentioned Gil Shway. He's probably one of Israel's most well-known entrepreneurs. He's the founder of Checkpoint, which I'm not sure
Correct.
how much. What's the worth now? I think it's traded for, I don't know, billions. No, isn't it? Like
Few
over.
billions. I don't know the exact number, but a few billions, and one of the largest 5 security companies in the world.
Yeah. Now, I by the way, didn't serve with Liran. Just so you know, I was in the army. I was in the education department. My job was, hold on tight now, okay? My job was to choose the films, like movies, for the library of the army, so that those that come from afar, because I was in Tel Aviv, used to rent it. I was not the right guy for the job because what they didn't know was I'm a huge fan of horror movies. But that's a different story. So, Liran, now, can you tell us about the relationship between 8200 and Team8? Basically, how did this relationship give you an unfair advantage, which is really an unfair advantage? It's obvious when you started Team8 7 years ago.
So first, I'll say there's no official relationship, right? Just to set it's clear. But we're the former leadership of 8200. So you mentioned Nadav while people were connecting. So I founded Team8 alongside my 2 dear co-founders, Nadav Tzafrir being one of them. He was the commander, the head of the organization. Some will say equivalent to director of NSA. And also Israel, who was the head of the cyber and data division. Today we have also Asaf, was the CTO for cyber at the unit, is now CTO and head of research for Team8. So really the former leadership in our past lives. And I think it brings two main advantages. One is around the expertise, and that is we really understand the attackers. We bring the attacker perspective. We understand how some of the most advanced attack organizations out there operate like and think like. And when you try to design the next generation security solutions, it's great to understand how would the attacker try to circumvent it and build something that is resilient to it. By the way, 8200 is very famous for its cyber expertise, but also in the world of data, machine learning, AI, it's super dominant. 8200 is doing what is called today big data, much before that term was invented. It's intelligence gathering, piling enormous amounts of data. And in 8200's case, creating mission critical, life-saving insights and predictions from data, which is very unique. You see, if you look at the Fortune 500 companies, putting aside the Googles and the Facebooks of the world for a second, the tech companies, not a lot of companies are really applying AI at scale for real business impact. 8200 does this for years. So not only the talent pool that I talked about is relevant for cyber experts and technologists and engineers, it's also true for data science with data analysts, data engineers that are doing the plumbing of doing data at scale, and data scientists, of course, that actually develop the AI models, the machine learning models, and the predictions. So I think the expertise in cyber and data from this very strategic standpoint as a former leadership is one advantage that we brought to the table. The other is access to talent. We talked about the impact of 8200 on Israel with this evergreen flow of talents coming out of the unit. We in Team8 have an unfair advantage just knowing who are the best of the best. So if 8200 chooses the 1%, we know who are the 1% of the 1% that has left the unit, and they're the ones that are worth their time in gold. And we just, we have the relationship, we know who they are, at least the one that is left in the, let's say, last 10 years and the ones that will be living in the next 5 years. And we either go and partner with them to build new companies, or we help recruit them to work for our portfolio companies. And access to talent is the most important advantage that you can have. I'd say though, Danny, that 8200 is definitely a great advantage that Team8 has. But in the last 7 years, we've surrounded ourselves with many more capabilities. Not only that, it's also, we have partners today that are serial security and IT infrastructure entrepreneurs. We have the former head of cybersecurity for Citigroup, one of the 3 largest banks in the world. He ran probably one of the most complex cyber operations out there. He's now a operating partner at Team8, Charles Blauner from Citigroup. And we have a network of more than 200 such head of securities from enterprises. I think we've also partnered with Admiral Mike Rogers, who was director of NSA, to kind of complement and augment the 8200 perspective with the equivalent in the US. So since then, we've built a lot of capabilities in security, but 8200 is definitely where we started.
Great. Now, by the way, I see here that Joe, hi Joe, is telling us Checkpoint market cap is $18 billion. Unbelievable.
Wow.
And what I wanted to say, by the way, about Liran is very modest. He doesn't tell you that he was chosen by Forbes to be on the under 30 list. And that's amazing. They reached to me, but I didn't get the email, so I kind of missed that. And another thing you should know about Liran is that thanks to him, I had to upgrade our entire Zoom plan because of the amount of people that wanted to be on this call today. So we need to bill you for that, but that's just another impressive thing I wanted to mention. So can you give us an example of how these unfair 8200 advantages led to tangible cybersecurity innovation?
I think for this, I'll maybe give the first company that we built out of Team8. We didn't have much. We'll talk about Team8 probably more, but we're a venture group that builds companies and invests in companies in a very unique manner. And to connect to your question on the 8200 advantage and tangible innovation, the first company that we've built is a company called Illusive Networks. It was back in 2014 when we started. Team8 was the first company. Today it's backed with, I think, more than $60 million. Investors include Microsoft and Citigroup and Cisco, and Bessemer Venture Partners have led round there, and really protecting some of the world's largest enterprises with a very unique innovation. And I want to show you, give you a little bit of context of what they're doing to explain the attacker perspective. I'll use a visual if you don't mind. So this, some of you might have heard, is the target breach that occurred, as you see on the timeline, at the end of 2013, just before Team8 was founded. And it was a very famous breach because I think it's a very interesting one. I'll walk you through them real quick. B, it was the first time that a CEO was let go, was fired because of a cyber attack. Which really started, the board of directors of companies and the C-suite of companies to start thinking about cyber risk as one of the major business risks from back in, 6-7 years ago. It was also an attack that resulted in 40 million credit cards that were stolen by the attackers. And if you want to understand the economics behind it, attacker groups that create the demand for this in advance, it's an attack that takes months. Sells every such fresh credit card before it's being blocked for about $10 in the darknet, which you can understand the magnitude of revenue that an attack team gets from such an attack. So that what happened in Target. If you want to dive into technology a little bit, the attack at Target started with this contractor on the left called Fazio. It's an air conditioning vendor that Target works with, and it accesses a billing system within the Target network in order to report, payments and all of that. The attacker actually circumvented Fazio. It's a much less secure company, but through that, they will be able to, jump into the Target network. And through all sorts of loops, eventually got into where they wanted, which is credit cards. And they realize that the credit cards, when they're stored in a database, they're encrypted, you can't access them. You actually need to get to the point of sale where you swipe the credit card. This is the only point where you can actually access cards. And, it's very hard to get into those thousands of points of sales at every branch of Target. And they, throughout the attack, discovered this very unique server that is responsible for pushing updates to the point of sales when you actually want to upgrade the software. And they maneuvered it so they actually push an update to all the point of sales with their malware included in that package, and quietly since have been sitting there and copying every swipe of a credit card and eventually taking it out to their cloud and selling it in the darknet. But what's interesting about all these stories that it's not about how they initially breached the network through Fazio and the vendor area, or not about at the end how they took it out. It's about this time in the middle where, we don't know exactly what happened. We know just to some extent, but basically there's attackers, bringing back the attacker perspective that we talked about. There is an attack organizations behind the scene, making decisions, collecting data. Eventually you see this golden path or red path here of how the attack took place, but there were thousands of other trials and errors throughout the journey, which is where the attacker collects data, trying to understand where he is, trying to understand where he can go to next, until he finds and figures out where the target that he's looking for, in this case, credit cards. And here we brought the attacker perspective, understanding this operational art, and created Illusive Networks, which is the pioneer of what is today called deception technology, with the concept of deception everywhere, meaning all of those gray machines that you see here, a lot of them are fake ones that Illusive has planted false pieces of information, so that when an attacker lands in your network, no matter where he is, and he starts sniffing for information to understand things, he will be fed with false information, which allows us to detect the attacker much more effectively, much sooner in the attack lifecycle. So that's a very unique innovation, a huge category today that protects, a lot of enterprises, some of the largest ones in the world, and have found external threats, found crazy insider threats for organization, have proven very valuable, dozens of millions of dollars in revenue, growing, very successful company. And I think that's a great example of how we brought this attacker perspective into creating a real meaningful company.
Amazing. Now, Team8 is not your average VC, right? I mean, even in the way you guys work, which I believe one of the interesting points is finding the problem and building a solution for that, and not just
right,
like most by just investing in companies. But anyway, tell us why you built it the way you have and how it works.
So I think we started by looking at various models of how innovation is introduced to the world, or technology innovation specifically. And we looked at three things: academia, incumbents, and startups. Academia, brought a lot of inventions to the world. And we realized, that the beauty of it is that it has amazing depth of technology research on the one hand, which, is great for every startup if you could have that. But on the other hand, they're shooting too far away for the future. They're not focused on commercial innovation to solve the here and now problem that we were focusing on. It has the disadvantages as well. The incumbents, on the other hand, and when I say incumbents, I mean the big enterprises, the big tech companies, the big security companies like Checkpoint, or a big company at any vector, any sector, they have a lot of resources, and they have great access to the market. They understand the customers. They are already existing customers. The best thing you can have when you try to really solve a big problem for the enterprise is really understanding it in depth. But on the other hand, still, they're very much bureaucratic, typically, and enclaved in their own business models, and it's hard for them to innovate. And in cyber, for example, you can see specifically in cyber that most of the innovation is happening through startup companies, and then the incumbents are actually acquiring companies and not developing innovation organically. The third option is startup companies, and startups are amazing because we've seen it, that they are laser focused founding team, that this is his life mission, focused on solving something very concrete, agile, dynamic, a culture of a startup, apropos the entrepreneurial failure tolerant culture that I mentioned before. But they don't have any resources. They don't have any access to the market. They lack the deep technology capability, research capability. They lack critical mass of talent. They don't have anything. It's basically, when they start, it's two entrepreneurs in the garage. And we've looked at a lot of our friends that have tried to build companies and very talented teams. And as you all know, the success rate for startup companies is very low. And we asked ourselves, we meaning Nadav, Israel, and myself, when we started, is how can this be improved? Or more specifically, how can the venture ecosystem, which we're now part of, But how can this venture capital world, which is the backbone of startups that help them, with capital, how can we be much more influential and contribute much more than capital to contribute to the entrepreneurial success? And we saw the opportunity there. And that's basically based on this realization, we've built a Team8, which is unique, I think, indeed. So we've built this platform. I can show it as well. That basically has a very strong platform team of about 40 people in-house that includes a very strong research group with ex-attackers, with data scientists, with technologists and researchers in-house, replicating to some extent what the academia has. We've built the capability to bring on board an incredible critical mass of talent based on the unfair advantage that we have, which we mentioned. And we've surrounded ourselves with what we call the Team8 Village, which is today more than 200 enterprises that are committed to this vision of solving big problems and give us this privileged insider's view into their challenges, which the incumbents have, but startups do not have. And we brought all of this together into a process that basically takes what two entrepreneurs do in the garage, but make a profession out of it, make it very systematic and professional. I've built a whole, firepower, crazy firepower behind these 2-3 entrepreneurs that are building a new company. And I do want to use this slide more to explain how it works. So this village and company builders team that we have come up together in all sorts of engagement platforms and eventually coming up with a thesis, with a problem domain that we believe there's a big opportunity behind it. One thing that we do is investing in companies, which is an area that everybody is more familiar with. We see a lot of companies, we review them. With just some of them that we believe there's something big behind them, we do a deeper technical due diligence and market validation, and then eventually invest in the very promising ones and helping them grow. But what Team8 does in addition is this part above, where we, when we see a great opportunity, a great challenge that nobody is tackling, we actually build a new company from scratch. And this goes on a gating process, a very disciplined one, bringing the village, bringing our team and the founders together to explore the problem in depth, then to ideate ideas on how to solve it, validate it extensively, and eventually, launching a new company, forming the team and launch it to market. We've built this way about 12 companies that have been very successful and are continuing to do so. And I think this whole model altogether, the platform team, the village, the process, is really for everyone involved here, which is the entrepreneurs, ourselves, but also our investors, is really is a win-win in the sense that it's dramatically de-risk company building and investing, and dramatically increases the chances of success. So that was the thinking process behind what we've built.
Amazing. Now, as you, those of you who read my post about this session, noticed that I had to work very, very hard because I had to do many hashtags in one post because of the huge names that are related to Team8, and I basically took half of them out. So the fund has LPs that and I've seen many funds that you just don't see. I mean, you just don't see that even with very established funds. Microsoft, Walmart, Barclays, AT&T, Moody's, Airbus. I think it's not written here, but Scotia and many other names that I wrote about in my post. So how did that happen? I mean, how do you get such names to invest in Team8? These are the biggest names in the world.
I think they, first of all, they relate to our vision of solving some of the world's biggest problems. And these are problems that are relevant for them. And we mostly focus on helping enterprises digitally transform. And it's a huge challenge for all of these companies that you've mentioned. And it is a really unique pool of LPs, I agree. And I think what they see in Team8, other than, fantastic financial return, but they are strategic investors partnering with us for more than that. I think what they're seeing is that it's a different kind of like partner in their open innovation program, if you'd like. It's not like you're subscribing to passively get our research or meet our companies, or we help you scout for innovations from outside. It's the one and only model out there that actually allows them to impact the kind of problems that we will solve, and that we will actually build companies from scratch, or will invest in companies, which is something they cannot do in any other way. There's no other partners. VCs do not have the muscle power of really building something from scratch. They do investments typically. So I think that model really resonated. We've built it in a way, it's cliche, but we call it our village, because we believe that in order to solve big problems, it takes a village. The LPs are the core of the village. We have, about 200 more enterprises around them today. And we've designed the way we work to be very collaborative. We've designed, if I showed you earlier the company creation process with gates, each gate for each company, 3 such gates, is a 4-hour session where we go deep into the past few months of research, share with them the challenges, the dilemmas, and we bring all of those names that you mentioned around the table. It's a room of about 50 people, and you have Microsoft and Walmart and Airbus and Barclays and all these companies together, different vantage points, different perspectives, different sectors, different geographies together, and this is where magic happens. And I think we invested a lot and perfected it to work this way. And I think today these LP investors never miss, a gating session. They always want to get into those one of the 3 gatherings a year when we do this, because this is the pace and dynamics of how Team8 builds companies and invests in companies, which we've really worked a lot on making it successful.
We forgot several startups like Cisco, AT&T, SoftBank, Munich Re, Scotia, Accenture. So
yeah, and by the way, I will maybe augment this with saying that eventually they become either early adopters of the technologies and eventually customers, and we're solving a big problem for them. But a lot of the times, there's more than that. A lot of the time, there's business partnerships that are created because they were so involved from day one, from the creation of the company. I'll give one example, Munich Re. Munich Re is one of the largest reinsurer in the world. One of the companies that we've built is a company called Curv, which is a platform to securely manage digital asset, cryptocurrencies and other security tokens for financial institutions. So there's Munich Re, an insurance company, Curv, which provides this secured management platform for digital assets, and the financial institutions companies. But because Munich Re was so exposed to the process, we've launched a company with a bundled insurance model as part of it. So every financial institutions adopting Curv solutions can automatically be, without any other very painful process, very easily can be insured automatically, or can automatically insure all those assets, which is something that for the ones close to this industry is very, very challenging. It created a new business model for Munich Re, and it created an amazing advantage for Curv. A great example, maybe one more because it's even further unique, is with Moody's. So Moody's is another name I'm not sure we've mentioned. They are an LP in Team8. Cyber was very close to them, and they realized the potential of, as part of their credit score, they relate to cyber risk, but they saw the potential of this being a business of itself, and a service that actually enterprises want to know what their cyber rating is and where do they stand compared to others in their industry. But they lack the domain expertise. And this is where Team8 and Moody's has built a joint venture together, a new company from scratch, based on the fact that they were investors. Then we explored this in depth and decided to build a company in this space, and doing really with a vision of creating the world standard for cyber risk rating, which will be kind of like very synergetic to the credit rating of Moody's. Just to name another example of the kind of strategic value that they get by working with us.
Amazing. I see we get some questions. We'll get to that in a second. So let's talk more about this Foundry model. How has it facilitated tangible success in a way that another VC group couldn't have? Or Another thing that would be happy to hear is, maybe an example of a company you built through this Foundry vehicle, which I think you gave us a couple of examples, but, you can share some more.
So I'll try to. Maybe I'll try to give an example to show, I think, the value that we brought throughout the journey. So one of the companies we've built is Claroty, which is today the world leader in industrial security. And the inception of Claroty was based on the fact that we've identified first the problem. The world of industrial networks represents, about a third of the world's economy. So this is not IT, computers, servers, cloud, everything we know about. This is OT, operational technologies, which is basically the technology running energy, oil and gas, and everything manufacturing. So automotive, pharma, chemicals, all of these companies, the core of what they're doing is with operational technologies and not information technologies. And these industrial networks of the energy companies and manufacturing, in the past, there are like a few things that have changed, really creating this perfect storm that we've identified for the creation of the company. One is that they were isolated. It was an air-gapped company. Nobody should have accessed it from the outside. So therefore, it wasn't, there was not a lot of cyber concerns there in terms of cyber threat. But this has changed because you want those networks to become smarter with analytics. And you have to look at COVID, for example. You have to get remote access to those facilities, to these utilities, right? So these networks are becoming more and more, connected, which is one thing that started to bring cyber threat their way. The second part is that they were just not attacked because attackers focus on cybercrime, at least, on financial monetization. So they're looking for credit card, like we talked about at Target, or bank accounts and all of that. In industrial networks, in the manufacturing plant of Coca-Cola, there's no money. You can't steal anything. It doesn't. But attackers, understood that they can get a hold of something precious to the company, send a ransom letter, and get quite a few bitcoins back, just so that so their network are not hurt. So the attackers found a way to monetize that, which brings more and more attacks to this world, relatively new. Regulation understood it, and our regulations actually requires you to protect OT networks, not just IT. And lastly, there's a lot of organizational change that we've started witnessing happening, which is the ones running security, which only looked at IT, started getting responsibility for the operational networks as well. It was the shop floor folks dealing with it beforehand, the ones actually doing the manufacturing, not the IT folks didn't get anywhere near it, and that has started changing. So we identified all this, a perfect storm that was there for the momentum of building a company. And I've done two things that are very important. One is the forming of the team. I think the team behind Claroty is not a team that was, created by themselves. We brought together a serial entrepreneur that has successfully built a company in the space, a genius 8200 grad PhD in mathematics to be the CTO, the one running technology for the company, and a Bulgarian lady living in Canada, working at Siemens, which is one of the leading players in the world and really understand the industry. So we brought entrepreneurial expertise, technology expertise, and business expertise together as the founding team, which was one of the unique parts of this company's success with this phenomenal team. And the other thing is that the company needed to really, from a technology standpoint, reverse engineers protocols of the Siemens, Rockwell, Schneider Electrics of the world in order to develop their technology. And this is the exact kind of talent pool that 8200 brings. And we needed to really bring a critical mass of researchers to do all of this real quickly to support all of those different manufacturing sites. And I think that's where we were being successful with as well. And just to keep this story short, Claroty is today, we created this together with a founding team with a few millions of dollars in capital. Bessemer Venture Partners led the B round of, I think, $27 million. And then Temasek out of Singapore led the C round for the company for $70 million more, where both Rockwell, Siemens, Schneider Electric, and also from the automotive space, BMW and GM invested in the company, really signaling this as the market leader. It really became the #1 company in the space and the leader. It's a huge and growing market, and I think it has a bright future and has the potential, in my opinion, to go IPO. Just as an example of a journey of how we started from scratch, from understanding a problem to forming a team to ideate the solution, to build it and scale it and really support the company all the way.
Amazing. I have somebody writing me here. This is the most interesting webinar they've seen in our series so far. So that's great. And by the way,
thank you.
Yeah, I think I hope people understand that we are really dealing with one of the most cutting edge groups that ever came out of Israel. I think we've been after you guys for 2 years until we managed to finally get your attention and do this. And I want to ask you, by the way, those hackers, right, which are very sophisticated people, and what you showed before, I mean, these it's an art what they do. Some of them, I mean, do they catch them? I mean, forget stopping them, but do they actually manage to catch them eventually, or they're so sophisticated they get away with it?
Yeah, it's a very tricky question because it goes cross countries, right? So a lot of the time you see hackers from China hacking a US company, and then how you can finance is very complex, and it's very you can technologically really hide behind, it's very, the advanced attackers know how to clean up the fingerprints to allow the defenders to get back to them. So a lot of the times it's very hard to, you focus on protecting, and you're not really knowing who is the bad side behind the scenes. You also think of an attacked organization. You are not allowed legally to go and attack back in order to understand what's happening. Who's this? Okay, if that IP attacked me, this is where I identified the attack come from. You report this to the government, but you're not allowed to then research more. You're not the police, you're not the NSA, etc. So it's really hard for this to be done. And of course, there's governments that do better work or less better work in this world, but a lot of the cyber criminal organizations out there are not being caught. That's true.
Like the guys that did Target, that was very famous in the US, but was huge. Were they caught? Do you know, or you have no idea? Okay.
No.
So tell me about an exit that you're proud of that demonstrates the kind of success you expect to continue building.
So I'll keep this one short maybe. So Sygnia is an example. It's a company we've built a few years back. It was focused on incident response. If you look at the kind of like the cyber chain, it was focusing on helping companies that have already been breached. Something bad has happened. When the shit hits the fence, this is where you've called Sygnia, developed very interesting proprietary tool for incident response and threat hunting. And that's a company that we invested $4.3 million in when we, as part of the incubation of the company within Team8. And just 3 years after, it was acquired for $250 million, $250 million in 3 years' time. So that's a phenomenal financial return. To some extent, we're very proud of the value that we've been building to really be a leader in the space in such a short while. But it also proved, specifically here, the Foundry model of Team8, as reminding we're both building companies and investing in companies, just to show how powerful it is, because that exit has returned 3x the whole fund. And that's our first fund that we've raised. It also has Claroty, which we talked about, the market leader in industrial security, and also Illusive, which we talked about as well, actually. So great companies still growing, but just this one exit out of many companies in the fund, returned 3x the whole fund, and there's more and more growing value. So I think it proved that this unique Foundry model, part of the house at Team8, is also in VC terms is very powerful in terms of the potential returns. So that's one we're very proud of.
You should. So we're getting some questions that actually lead me to my next question. People are asking, how do they invest with Team8 through a fund or otherwise? So maybe what I will say before that, being in the family office scene, and most of the people here are families, I think they were always first to react when there was an opportunity, whether it was opportunity zone, whether it was blockchain, whether it was cannabis. And most of the time, they were not, the stupid herd, pardon me, that, invested, let's say, in stupid blockchain companies, because they were fast to see a trend, understand it as an opportunity. And I think in most cases, of course, everybody can make mistakes, but they had the tools to do the right due diligence. And that brings me to what you guys are doing now and how COVID affects that, because I spoke also with Sarit about the fact that obviously in some places at least, COVID must also allow interesting opportunities. And I think families understand they're liquid. Larry Silverstein, I always quote him, said, I never want to miss on a good recession. And families understood they're liquid, and probably some companies are in distress, meaning the valuation will be way more comfortable, which probably would make your IRR way better. So you are now fundraising $150 million for Team8 Capital. So tell us about that and how COVID impacted the new fund.
Yeah, so just to explain, so Team8 Capital is our investment arm. We have a Foundry arm and an investment arm. So Team8 Capital is where we invest in companies leveraging all this unique platform to make very smart investment decisions, leveraging it for the thesis development, for the technical due diligence, for the market validation with our village. And then, of course, it doesn't matter if we created the company or invested in it early stage, we support their growth. So this is the investing side, which is the one fund that we're raising for right now. We actually also already closed the first closing of $105 million a few months back. And then exactly at that stage, COVID emerged, and we paused the fundraising activity for a couple of months. But since we had first closing, so the fund is actually already operational and has landed 4 investments. We're nearing potentially a 5th investment very soon. And now are starting to fundraise the remaining $45 million. There's some of it already committed, but there's still opportunity to invest in that fund. And we're always happy to, expand our LP base and potential investors. I think what's happening in terms of COVID-19 and the fund and the fundraising for the fund is enterprise technology, which is a lot of what we're focusing on. The demand is growing, cloud adoption is accelerating, and there's, if you look at the cyber side of the house, so new threats are coming, transitioning to remote work really, increases the attack surface, and we're seeing enterprise adopting to it amazingly. You see actually programs that were planned for 3 years' time at a bank, for example, taking 3 months. And we're witnessing this again and again. It's amazing how COVID has become the #1 accelerator for digital transformation. So in terms of the business that we're playing in, couldn't be a better time in a way. I know that it sounds surprising, but that's the case. So that's in terms of the business itself. In terms of the world of investments, and then you mentioned this, and rightfully so, there are tremendous opportunities now as companies are looking to fundraise now. These are great companies that actually have runway to raise, or they plan to raise later in the future. But as part of how they adapted to the situation, which is the exercise that we've done, which is with each of our portfolio companies, they said, okay, so we need to assume that we can't raise capital for the next 2 years, let's say, but so we need to accordingly adjust our pace of burning cash. But if we actually successfully raise capital now, we can continue run faster, maybe faster than we could, without the worrying, although the next 2 years is, we don't know what the world will look like in the next few years. So many companies preempt the fundraising, lower valuation, great opportunities with great traction. And we've seen it in the last 6 months when we've been investing even through this fund, really phenomenal opportunities. And just to maybe even say how also statistically this is correct, history has proven that the vintage year of funds that were starting to work during or right after a crisis, they're always the best vintage years, which luckily this Team8 Capital fund is exactly at this point, and I think it will be able to leverage a lot of those opportunities out there. So I agree very much.
So someone is asking here, can an individual in Team8, can individuals invest in Team8? I think, yeah, through a fund or otherwise, if you can be more specific about minimum investment, how they can invest.
Yeah, so we have numerous types of investors, individual included, family offices. We also have obviously corporate investments that we mentioned and fund of funds. The typical check sizes for an investor within the Team8 fund is between $5 to $20 million. Then we talked a little bit beforehand. So giving kind of like the introductory to this community, we will be lowering the bar to $2 million. So the minimum check size will be $2 million. Whereas the typical sweet spot for Team8 is a check size between 5 to 20. And, basically the opportunity is to invest in Team8 Capital, which is now fundraising. There's the $45 million left for the next few months, which is great. And Team8 keeps fundraising for multiple things later on, more funds, Foundry funds, or investments funds. And we also work with a lot of individual investors and family offices in leveraging our pro rata rights to invest in follow-on rounds of our portfolio companies when we ran out of the reserves. So a lot of the time we reach out to our network of investors to sometimes invest in a specific company thereafter. So whomever is joining the family, there's a lot of, I think, investment opportunities. But now is actually a great time as we are at the last stage of raising for Team8 Capital. So we'd love to work with new investors as well.
A couple of questions from Joe here. What's the name of the Moody's JV? And he's asking something I think you have addressed a little bit. Does building companies from scratch give LPs access to technology that is potentially unique? I think so. Is that quality one thing that attracts those LPs? I think you mentioned that, but these are two questions from Joe.
Yeah, so with the last ones, yes, I think it's exactly, Joe, you were referring to exactly what their what the uniqueness that they found in Team8. Because we're building companies, we actually have we're a research group in-house where they see us as a think tank. They have access to all the research that we're doing, and they have very early access to the product and technologies themselves, which allows them to be more competitive if they do adopt technologies sooner. By the way, in cybersecurity, some will say you won't get fired if you buy an IBM, right? Because I bought the best of breed. I bought IBM. What can you? What have I done wrong? But in cybersecurity, you will get fired if you just buy an IBM. You have to work with startups. The pace of change. Attackers know how to circumvent. The more traditional products. You need to consume startup technologies. You need to be much more agile. And this is why definitely in security, it's the example that is to the most extent enterprises understand they have to embrace and adopt startup companies and more younger products, whereas in other places they can be a little bit more traditional. So that's for the investors. What was the first question, Danny?
The name of the Moody's JV.
Okay, so it's still in stealth mode. We haven't launched the company, so it doesn't have a name. When it will be launched with a name to it that we will reveal as we launched it. So not yet. So don't have a name to share yet. I'm sorry.
Now Terry is asking, what is the outlook for investing in incubated companies in Team8 versus finding broader options in the third-party market?
Yeah, so we're doing both. I think we're at a very interesting position to do those things. When we build companies from scratch, or maybe I'll take a step back, the way we operate, whether we build or invest, is we come up with a thesis. We leverage the research group in-house. We leverage our village. We come up with an investment thesis that goes after the problem domains that we believe have great opportunities behind them. We also look at the areas where Team8 believes that we can contribute to the success, that there are areas that we really know about. Because we believe that even when we talk about investments in startups, if we can't bring real value to the company should choose a better investor. So we believe that we'll invest only in areas that we bring a lot of value, and therefore will be chosen, and therefore we'll be working with the best entrepreneurs. But based on that, if we come up with this thesis, we will first look at the outside world. If there's great companies, if it's already mature, we won't build new Me Too companies, that's for sure. If it's in its early stage and we sense that there's great teams that we're seeing eye to eye on the thesis, that is part of, we see them in the deal flow, based on that research that we've done, we will invest. And here it's a kind of like a flexible model with the market terms. Team8 Capital intersects startups at seed, A, and B rounds. So it's kind of like all of what is referred to as early stage. And this is the areas that we invest in. We can lead rounds, we can co-lead round, etc. And the creation of companies is very interesting. We typically incubate companies with a given investments of $5 million as the seed capital. We do that seed capital ourselves out of our own Foundry fund. And then we only do pro rata rights with follow-on rounds. If in terms of, you can see one advantage is to see that the fundraising of our portfolio companies after the $5 million seed, you see in average the A round span between 15 to 25, even $27 million, just to see the amount of value that the companies have been creating using this $5 million, plus the Team8 investments. You can call the Team8 investments a few more $1 million of investment in kind and not in sweat capital and not in capital on top of the investments, really creating a lot more value than maybe the typical seed staged company would build with that capital. So practicing those two things, there's great opportunities on both front. We're leveraging the Israeli ecosystem, which is the talent pool where we have an unfair advantage access to, just for the both worlds, for working with the best entrepreneurial team and invest in them, or for crafting and creating new companies, new teams to build new things from scratch. A lot of passion to both arenas.
Now, what are some of the trends you see in cyber? And
okay, so that's a big one. How much time do we have? That's a big question.
Yeah, just give us a broad perspective of what you see.
Okay, so let's talk cyber. One is, for the first part, or maybe, you know what? Let's use some slides. Let's enjoy a little bit. So, and cyber, you see it all around, right? You see cyber every day in the newspapers. You see electricity goes down in the Ukraine. You see the banking infrastructure of the world, like SWIFT, being breached. You see the logistical infrastructure of the world with companies like Maersk being breached. And you even see democratic elections impacted by cyber. This is something that you all know, but it's really impact every part of civilization, and every day we see it. Another interesting thing to share about cyber is that if you look at this hyperconnectivity pace, which I think at around 2007 really had an inflection point, that had direct impact to cyber, because up until that area, attackers and defenders were living in some kind of equilibrium where, the attackers invented something new, but the defenders, us, the security industry, were able to circumvent it, and we're dealing with the challenge. But since the hyperconnectivity really started scaling, the offense scaled with it, riding up on the attack surface that is growing as everything becomes more connected, but the defense really couldn't keep up. And there's a lot of reasons to it. The attackers, actually, you'll see it in this slide. The attack, there's really an asymmetry creating this gap, which is unsustainable. The attacker needs to be right just once to find the hole to start his attack. And the defender, the enterprise protecting itself, it can't be wrong, even though it needs to be right all the time, close all the holes. The attackers, it's getting easier for them. There's more and more attack surface all the time. And for the defenders, they need to, buy more products, protect more attack surface, protect more things, have to relate. I think I have another slide here. This is not an up-to-date slide that shows the variety of security offering that every average CISO have, between a few dozens or a couple of hundreds of such solution installed in his network. The complexity is huge. It's, purchasing, just evaluating which product is better, purchasing the right one, integrating it, implementing it, And these products then bring alerts. And the alerts, someone needs to go over all these alerts. The more products you have, the more alerts coming up. And then you need more people. And there's a huge shortage of cyber talent. So you need more and more people to go over all these alerts, really becoming unsustainable, and just shows how the asymmetry is strong. The attackers have no cost, and they just, purely invest in what they need. While for the defenders, the cost is dramatically growing, and there's a lot of other parts to it. Even regulation. The enterprises are so regulated in what they can do, whereas the attackers, they're criminals. They can do whatever they want. So in a lot of senses, the attackers have the upper end. I think in terms of trends more concretely to this day and age, I think three interesting things. There's this whole bucket of areas where we need to build cyber resilience. And we have a whole thesis around the areas within this that, given more time, we can dive into the different investment theses that we have in different horizons of adoptions with just building cyber resilience, which means coming after the fact, meaning this is the technology infrastructure of organizations today. Let's try to then protect it. That's one bucket that is the vast majority of the security market. The second is what we call cyber by design. These are companies that can be created that are not security companies. They can be IT infrastructure, networking infrastructure, data infrastructure, storage, cloud, compute, what have you. But the way they were designed and introduced to the world is there's a very strong new security architectures that come through it. So you sell storage, but it's very secured storage. And these are where there's tremendous opportunities. One example, we have a company called Hysolate that really built a new architecture for the modern workstation, the laptop or desktop that every employee at an enterprise work with. And they are a great example also to a company that did a lemonade out of this lemon of the crisis and introduced a new product based on this architecture. What they created is the ability to say, okay, it's not one operating system. They split it virtually to a few virtual machines behind the scenes. It's completely seamless to the user, but behind the scenes, everything that is sensitive runs on one operating system. Everything that is connected to the internet runs on another, and they don't meet each other, making the breach irrelevant. So you don't care if you're breached. It's not about the level of security. It's just an hermetic isolation of the two worlds, which made it very smart. And there's a lot of opportunities in that space. Lastly, I'll say there's another category which we at Team8 are very, very, very passionate about, which is cyber. So we talked about cyber resilience, we talked about cyber by design, and now we can talk about cyber as a business enabler. So when we talked cyber throughout this session today, we talked about scary things. It's a threat. We might be, severely attacked and all of that. But innovation in cyber can really become a business enabler, can allow you to do more things on the business side, to be more creative, to be more competitive, and grow your business if you're innovative in cyber. And that's a very fascinating area. I'll give an example. There's a very famous professor called Shafi Goldwasser who won a Turing Award, like a Nobel Prize for math and computer science, for inventing something called homomorphic encryption. Sounds like a curse, but it's a theoretical mathematical capability allowing you to analyze data without actually seeing the data while it is still encrypted. Typically data, it's encrypted when it's stored, it's encrypted when it moves from one place to another, but when you want to use it, you have to decrypt it, see the real data, and derive the insight. This allows you in specific use cases and specific questions on the data to do this while the data is still encrypted. And it allows to do, it sounds like magic, but it allows you to give your data to someone else to analyze it with zero risk of the data to be leaked, because this third party will analyze the data, will give you the return. You will then only be able to decrypt the return and see the answer. And the analyzing party, while solve the problem for you, didn't actually see what he solved for. which is, again, I know that it's hard to believe, but she invented this mathematical capability and won the Turing Award for that. She had a student at MIT that became a professor as well, and he had a student at MIT that is a graduate from his PhD. These two, actually, one of them implemented this theoretical math into real algorithms, solving all the practicality part of this. And the third student actually implemented a lot of these things at DARPA and other very interesting places in the industry. We basically, the group there, these three partnered with two Israelis. They are from the US. The two Israeli, one of them alone was the leading data science at RSA, very famous security companies, and another lady who's the chairwoman of the company, veteran in the industry, called Rina. Together, these are the founding team of one of our companies, Duality, and they really are the pioneers bringing that capability to the world. And now relating it back to business enablement. What this allows you to do is, let's choose an example. We want to cure cancer, right? Let's agree on that we want the world to cure cancer. What Duality allows you to do using homomorphic encryption is to let the healthcare providers that have, let's say, our health data that hold DNA sequences, which we definitely as patients don't want our healthcare provider to share this data, because it's very sensitive. They can replicate us someday. You can reverse engineer to find us using our DNA, even if it's anonymized. We definitely want our healthcare providers to keep our data safe. But this Duality allows for the healthcare provider to send, let's say, data sets of millions of DNA records, of genome records, to the pharma companies, developing all sorts of clinical trials and tests on DNA sequences in order to find cure for cancer. But they can do this with agreed upon questions on the data that give them just aggregate results while not being able to actually see the data itself, while not have the data at risk at all. And currently they just can't do it, or it's very challenging. The business is going very slow because they can't have the data sets they need in order to find the cure. Duality is now actually allowing you to do this. And the company is, other than venture capital investments, got a lot of grants to promote this. And it just goes to show one example of how this unique cyber capability is helping the business. To be honest, I believe it's just making, it's a technology that is good for humanity generally. So the pharma and healthcare providers for genome data, for example, is one example. We have competing banks in the UK and in Canada sharing data, sensitive data in between themselves in order to combat anti-money laundering and financial crime. Again, this is something on the business side that they couldn't have shared sensitive data in between themselves. This technology allows none of the side to see the data, neither a third party to see the data using that technology. And we even can have competing enterprises kind of like combine the data sets together in order to derive smarter insights based on the combined data sets, although nobody sees the data in full. So we have a lot of passion on cryptography generally, and that's just one example of homomorphic encryption of how cyber can become a business enabler. And I think this is a theme we'll see more and more.
And that's also related to privacy.
Yeah. And privacy, it's good that you mentioned it, because privacy is actually, it deserves a trend of itself. Because it's in the neighborhood of cyber, but privacy is something different. I think there's a great need today in the market for enterprises to just meet regulation, right? There's GDPR in Europe, there's CCPA, it's equivalent in California, in the US, and it will grow more and more. It's a regulation that requires enterprises to give more control for users on their data. You can ask a company, give me all the data that you saved on me, or ask to be deleted, for example. And there's a lot of challenges for enterprises to adhere to this regulation with all their legacy systems and databases and all of that. So there's great opportunities and companies there. But I think it's just the beginning, because digital trust is starting to become something very dominant. And enterprises will need to build trust with their consumers, not just by complying to regulation, but much more than that, by collecting and saving private data only when really needed, by giving visibility to the end users on why am I solving the data, what data have I solved, for what insights, showing it to me not just in order to tick the box of complying to regulation, but presenting it to me in a way that I can actually understand it and really give the sense of control to their data. So enterprises will need to do this in order to be competitive, because consumers, the awareness is growing, will want to be working with trusted companies. And enterprises will need a lot of help in making this transparent and clear, and find a way to not use data as they used to in the past. So I think there's phenomenal opportunities for startups in this space. We're working on a couple of ideas there. Too soon to say, but it's definitely a trend that we'll see more and more innovation coming to.
And one more quick question, and everybody will send the Liran's information, so you can all continue the conversation there. How do you avoid getting too heavily diluted with new investment rounds? And more importantly, avoid losing control before you're ready?
Yeah, so I think in that part, we're not special. We're working similar to how the venture capital world works. What happens is that we do an investment, whether at the seed stage or round A or round B. Typically, we lead round, so we have a significant portion of the company that's part of our model. And by the way, in the Foundry model, we hold a very significant equity stake in the companies because we're co-founders of the company in a way. So it's our investments, it's the fact that we created it from scratch. So we relatively hold significantly more than a typical VC would. So actually, if you actually thinking about it again, we do have an advantage, at least when the Foundry model kicks in. And then what we do thereafter is just use our preemptive rights to not be diluted. So we commit more capital until a certain valuation to preserve the equity stake by participating in the follow-on rounds. We do not lead a round after we already led one. We might extend it to build more value, but then thereafter we'll be continuing investing, keeping our pro rata rights, while of course making sure we're investing in companies that are growing to success. I think again here it's very similar to the other players in the venture ecosystem, and we've analyzed the numbers and the model that can really bring great returns, and that works.
And somebody said here, well, we need another session. Yeah, so what Liran doesn't know is that I will convince him to do yet a third session. I mean, we had Sarit, we had Liran, maybe we'll get Nadav to join as well. Another quick question. Okay, another one. Given that, how do you typically plan to exit? He's asking here.
Yeah. I'll say on exiting, I'll say the following. It's on a case-by-case basis. I think the mandate that we get from our investors is to build big companies, and that's our passion. And then there's also reality. We also need to be very careful of our LPs' returns. So giving, a phenomenal offer, we might not be able to refuse it, right? It's all dependent on the situation. So some of the companies at Team8 were acquired at a certain stage, like $250 million. Some will be acquired earlier. Some hopefully will go all the way to IPO. So we have the passion, we have the patience, and we want to take companies to really build an industry around them and build great big companies. There's ways to liquidate, by the way. The funds behind Team8 have a term. There's an investment period, and then there's a term of the fund where we eventually allow investors, if they do want to liquidate throughout the process, there's various ways to do it, but we will try, given that the company is successful and can build much more value for us and for our investors, we will try as much as possible to build great companies. Yeah. Obviously, as part of all these partnerships that we talked about, the Microsoft, the Ciscos, the Qualcomms of the world, these are also potential acquirers. Before that, they are business partners, but they are potential acquirers. We keep a lot of relationships with all of them and are very synced on agendas and roadmaps, and help our companies with these strategic aspects as well.
And you write here, you would love to understand more about the fund. We'll connect you to Liran to do that. Anything else you'd like to add, Liran, at this stage? Obviously, there's a great opportunity with investing with you, and anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's great to be part of this community for the first time for me. I think, yeah, we're as the group is growing and looking to raise capital for various interesting things in the near future. So we're very excited to expand our LP base, which is also already very unique, but we're looking to grow it. So there's a great opportunity now to join Team8 Capital, which already has an amazing portfolio, and really, I think also, given the circumstances with COVID, which we've mentioned, really have a phenomenal opportunity to gain great results. So I think, Danny, you will share my personal email address. Happy to follow up with everyone that is interested and share more. And this was great and very interesting. Appreciate the time.
Of course, and I will quickly tell everybody, like I do at every session we do, I have amazing speakers coming up. Katsimatidis, one of the biggest names in New York, in America. Harrison family that we all know of, so from Israel. Mount Sinai, who else is better to speak about COVID-19 than Mount Sinai? And as I said, next month we're going to have an event at the World Trade Center's rooftop. If you're interested, let us know, with amazing keynotes, and probably the only conference you guys going to see this year anywhere. And it's going to be very safe on the rooftop. I will just say that my next session, which is going to be next week, September 3rd, is a very interesting one about a morbid topic of life settlements, which is an uncorrelated investment method that many think is, has issues with because of the morbid connection. But actually, you'll find that this is a very community positive investment that basically allows to take from the insurance companies that, when you cannot pay your payments anymore, they just take everything, the insurance companies, and everything you paid before goes to waste. So basically, they're helping people that don't need that plan anymore and buy it from them. So it's a very interesting topic about an uncorrelated investment vehicle. So thank you, Liran, very much for coming to the office when all of your friends are vacationing somewhere in very nice resorts. And we will send more information about how to reach Liran. And again, Nadav Safir, he's commander of 8200 and co-founder, will be speaking next month at the conference in New York. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. And it's been amazing, Liran. It's 1 hour and 20 minutes. Great.
Time passed fast. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.